Drones over Putin's head, blackouts, burning tankers, and a turn that could change the war. Explosions rock deep inside Russia as drones strike where it hurts most. Cities go dark, air defenses fire over residential areas, and a decades-old oil tanker turns into scrap metal in the heart of a major city. At the same time, Washington makes a sudden move. A massive defense decision passes the Senate, while Europe prepares billions more, from air defense and drones to artillery and electronic warfare. But the most dangerous battles may not be on the battlefield alone. Behind closed doors, territorial lines, security guarantees, and post-war scenarios are being discussed, with NATO-style commitments, frozen Russian assets, and pressure shaking Europe from within. The stakes are rising. Let's break down what's happening right now. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Drones are heading toward Putin. The danger has finally closed in on the dictator.
Air defense operations were also recorded in Moscow, the Leningrad region, Anapa, Baikonur, and Valdai. Apparently, greetings were sent separately to Putin in Valdai.
Russia's Minister of Defense claimed it shot down 47 drones and that the situation is under control. Local authorities also failed to conceal the attack on Bataisk in Russia's Rostov region. According to Russian media, the city was hit by a blackout and air defense systems engaged targets directly over residential buildings. It happened again. The Russian fleet is sinking before our eyes. Ukrainian drones finished the job. This time, Ukrainian defenders managed to strike an oil products tanker in the heart of Rostov-on-Don.
The tanker that was hit is reportedly named Valery Gorchakov, and 2 crew members are reported to have died.
The vessel was built in 1969 as dry cargo motor ship. In 2004, it was converted into an oil tanker designed to transport all types of petroleum products. Now it is nothing more than scrap metal. At the same moment, the Americans made a sharp turn. Is Ukraine's fate decided? The Senate passed a major defense bill that allocates $800 million to support our country.
The fiscal 2026 NDAA provides $800 million for Ukraine, $400 million in each of the next 2 years, as part of the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, which pays U.S. companies for weapons for Ukraine's military.
Europe is keeping pace as well. Next year, Germany has committed 11.5 billion euros in support for Ukraine. According to Denis Shmyhal, key agreements include long-term supplies of spare parts for Patriot systems. The defense minister also highlighted the purchase of Ukrainian UAVs worth 200 million euros. Plans also include producing 200 Bogdana self-propelled artillery units on the new Zetros chassis with a total cost of 750 million euros, as well as Linza drones. Moreover, contracts have been signed to ensure uninterrupted supplies for the latest tactical-level electronic warfare systems. Zelensky stated that Ukraine will not recognize Donbass as Russian, neither legally nor in fact. At the same time, within the framework of work on the peace plan with the United States, the issue of territories remains open as no common position has yet been reached.
Neither de jure nor de facto will we recognize Donbass as Russian, the part that is temporarily occupied. However, we will discuss territorial issues. You know, this is one of the key issues. We do not yet have a consensus, but there is progress on other matters.
The president also noted that Russia's intentions have not changed. The aggressor state continues to seek the capture of the entire Donbass. At the same time, Ukraine, he said, is defending a practical, realistic and fair position and has no intention of conceding its territories. Volodymyr Zelensky added that U.S. representatives are trying to find a compromise, including by proposing a free economic zone. At the same time, he emphasized that such a model in no way allows governance by the Russian Federation. If Russia attacks Ukraine again in the future, the United States and European countries would be obliged to intervene militarily. Americans and Europeans have developed a joint plan to support Ukraine after the signing of the peace agreement. Sources cited by the New York Times report that the drafted documents in particular provide for security guarantees based on NATO's Article 5 principle. More on the conclusion of peace between Ukraine and Russia and the terms of that peace ahead.
And I believe that right now we are closer to an agreement than ever before.
At this moment, the whole world is watching Ukraine's negotiation process.
Pressure on Russia is our policy. We can clearly see that they are not in the best position. And if our allies did the same, I think we would be very strong from Russia's perspective.
As a result of 2 days of negotiations in Berlin with senior representatives of the US administration, certain progress was achieved.
We have had numerous conversations with Putin. We will see what we can do. We want to save many lives.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the American side offered security guarantees comparable in their logic to those provided by the North Atlantic Alliance.
It is quite significant that Jared Kushner, a trusted confidant of Donald Trump and someone whom Trump listens to, participated in the negotiations.
According to the New York Times, American and European negotiators have drafted 2 documents to support Ukraine after a potential peace agreement is reached.
An American official, speaking on condition of anonymity, said that the document very specifically outlines how to prevent further invasions and how to punish Russia should they occur.
The key issues remain territorial disputes and Russia's willingness to accept the terms of the agreement.
Right now, in both legislative chambers of government, the current political sentiment leans strongly more towards supporting Ukraine and the need for continued assistance and the pressing need to put significant pressure on Russia and its government. And this, let's say, is driven not only by opposition from Republican Party representatives, but also from Republican voters. Recent polls conducted by the Reagan Institute clearly show that approximately 2/3 of all Americans strongly support Ukraine, and an even greater number unequivocally favor putting sustained pressure on Russia. And it's abundantly clear that, given the context of the forthcoming crucial congressional elections next year, Republicans absolutely cannot overlook this significant factor. And it is evident that they have to take necessary, appropriate steps.
One of the most difficult questions remains the fate of Donbass. The American side proposed considering the option of creating a free economic zone there.
In Europe, there was talk about the need for security guarantees for European contingents from the United States. And it's quite interesting whether there is any progress in this area, and it seems to me that there have indeed been certain changes in the US position in this direction, if they are ready to provide Ukraine with legal security guarantees. Although these legal guarantees do not include military involvement, Russia says, we are ready not to send troops into that part of Donbass from which Ukrainian forces will be withdrawn, but our forces, our National Guard, will enter there. Well, actually, the same forces that are fighting the Kadyrovites belong to the National Guard, just for the record.
According to CNN, the US has proposed a number of ideas to break the deadlock in negotiations. During the discussions, a security guarantee package was thoroughly developed, similar in logic to NATO's Article 5. But Russia is once again opposed.
There is a negotiation process. Our position is clear. Eliminate the root causes. The root causes are the threats to the Russian Federation, which were created by NATO's eastward expansion right up to our borders, and by drawing Ukraine in.
Lukashenko also helps promote the Kremlin's narrative, saying what Russians and Trump need to hear for Putin's money.
Every war ends in peace. Classic, and this war will also end in peace. The sooner it happens, the fewer people will die.
According to American officials, Putin is demanding additional steps aimed at weakening Ukraine's sovereignty.
Trump must finally start putting pressure on Russia. And his words that, well, all sides should make concessions should now be put into action in this direction. Let's hope that Donald Trump will finally move from words to action.
Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine will not give up its sovereignty over these territories and that any withdrawal of Ukrainian troops is only possible if Russian troops are withdrawn at the same time.
Right now, the ball is in Russia's court. Will it be possible to achieve peace by Christmas so that at the very least hostilities will stop for the duration of the holiday?
Ukraine supported the idea of a ceasefire targeting energy infrastructure during the Christmas holidays. The negotiations are also accompanied by disputes over the use of frozen Russian assets, which could amount to around 200 billion euros by 2027 and are intended to support Ukraine.
We are already seeing attempts to remove reparations and any form of accountability from a potential peace agreement. That is why the international community bears an enormous responsibility. In fact, we are doing more to deprive the Russians of the means to finance this war.
In the US, there is significantly less willingness to hold the Kremlin financially accountable.
The Americans say, leave those Russian assets alone because it's hard to sit down with Putin and talk about compromises while at the same time taking his money. This is the American argument, that we need to be very careful here and not push the situation to the brink.
After the meeting, Zelensky stated that if Moscow rejects the proposals under discussion, he intends to push the US to increase sanctions pressure on Russia.
We have not seen these messages yet. It is well known that such plans exist in the corridors of power in Washington. Any sanctions are detrimental to the process of building relationships.
In addition to sanctions, an important factor for Ukraine is the increase in military aid, including the supply of long-range weapons.
We can see how sensitive this issue is for Russia and how Ukrainian strikes on Russian energy infrastructure are causing systemic harm to the Russian economy as a whole.
The Ukrainian delegation will travel to the United States in the coming days with a plan developed together with the Europeans.
Heavy fighting is ongoing across several sections of the front line. Ukrainian units continue to hold their ground, successfully pushing back enemy attacks and delivering targeted strikes on Russian personnel, equipment and logistical hubs. Intelligence gathering, drone activity and artillery fire play a decisive role, allowing Ukrainian forces to disrupt enemy operations before they gain traction. Meanwhile, the situation along the front remains highly dynamic, with constant changes in troop deployments, supply lines and tactical decisions that could shape the course of the fighting in the hours ahead. A detailed look at what is unfolding on and around the front line right now in our overview.
For the second time in just the first half of December, the Russian army has taken Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region. This was reported by Russian Defense Minister Belousov. The city is under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces, who are unsuccessfully trying to regain control.
The West military group has taken the strategically important city of Kupiansk, which the enemy is unsuccessfully trying to reclaim. Supply routes for Ukrainian armed forces units pass through it.
On pro-Russian social media channels, there are videos allegedly showing Russian soldiers sending greetings from Kupiansk.
We, soldiers of the Russian Federation, are on the streets of the Russian city of Kupiansk. We send our regards to the expired president.
This is how disrespectfully the Russian occupier addresses the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. And it's simply impossible to tell where exactly this video was recorded.
A soldier could be walking down any street in any city, dressed in uniform, apparently a winter uniform. Why this supposedly proves the footage was shot in Kupiansk, to be honest, I don't understand.
The Ukrainian armed forces, specifically the Kharkiv brigade, outplayed the Russian command in the Kupiansk direction. Instead of the capture of the city declared by Moscow, the Russian group found itself surrounded with its logistics cut off.
Putin is publicly lying that Russian forces have taken the city. I personally went to Kupiansk to show the world that Putin is lying. Just to show this.
The operation to liberate and clear Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region is ongoing. Russian soldiers are surrendering or being eliminated. There is simply no evidence that the city is under the control of the Russian army.
There is abundant and compelling evidence that the city of Kupiansk has been successfully liberated, with the exception of only a few small isolated areas, specifically minor districts situated within the city itself, where small remaining groups of Russian troops are currently surrounded and contained.
The Ukrainian armed forces have achieved significant successes not only in the Kharkiv region, but also in the Donetsk region. A third of all clashes are taking place in this direction, specifically in Pokrovsk. And despite constant attacks by the aggressor, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to gain a foothold in the center of Pokrovsk. Ukrainian fighters succeeded in regaining control over 16 square kilometers in the northern part of the city.
The enemy has been trying to capture Pokrovsk for more than 17 months. However, Ukrainian units are holding the line and seizing the initiative. As a result of counter-offensive actions, they regained control over 16 square kilometers in the northern part of the city. They also recaptured 56 square kilometers of territory in the areas of the settlements of Grishino, Kotlino, and Udaknoye, west of Pokrovsk. Alexander Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
The armed forces of Ukraine continue to hold the defense of the Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad agglomeration, despite increased pressure from Russian troops and Kremlin statements about full control over Pokrovsk. Intense fighting continues around the clock in the center of Pokrovsk. On this front, cutting off logistics routes with drones is one of the main tactics of Russian forces.
The enemy is trying to strike the route and make rotation impossible, to disrupt logistics to Pokrovsk and thus break through the center. They have not succeeded. On December 10th, they made preliminary attempts to storm with armored columns in the direction of the settlement of Grishino. They were completely destroyed, losing all their armored vehicles as well as light vehicles, motorcycles, and all personnel within an hour. UAF soldier.
In the same Donetsk region, in the Dobropoli direction, the enemy is actively conducting assault operations. Taking advantage of the weather conditions, they are using not only infantry, but also equipment. In one of the latest assaults, the enemy used nearly 2,000 ATVs, infantry, and tried to advance as far as possible. But another assault by the Russian army failed.
Even as they were approaching the positions of the defense forces, the occupiers' assault group was destroyed. The successful joint work of drone units, artillery, and preemptive mining made this assault attempt as unsuccessful as possible.
Despite numerous statements from the command and Z-bloggers about new captures and successful actions, as we can see, the real situation at the front is difficult but under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces.
The Trump administration is pressuring EU countries to abandon a plan to use 210 billion euros in frozen Russian assets to finance Ukraine, Politico reports. This pressure has triggered an active debate within the European Union, where positions differ sharply. How Europe itself is responding to this pressure and whether Brussels is ready to withstand Washington's demands, coming up next.
Trump is saving Russia money and persuading the EU not to give the frozen assets of the occupying country to Ukraine. According to Politico sources, representatives of the US administration have been convincing European countries loyal to Washington to abandon the plan to use 210 billion euros of frozen Russian assets to support our country.
The US administration has this super idea to create a separate investment fund together with the Russians, or perhaps on other terms, but with the goal of using this investment fund to invest in restoring ties with the Russian economy and utilizing Russian natural resources and so on.
The pressure from the US was described to journalists by high-ranking officials from EU countries who participated in the relevant discussions. The White House denies this information, stating that they are not putting pressure on the Europeans. Moreover, it is claimed that both Kyiv and Moscow have made their positions clear regarding the issue of frozen assets, and Washington's role is limited to facilitating and maintaining dialogue, which could eventually lead to a peace agreement.
If the European Union transfers Russian assets to Ukraine, it will set a precedent. And in this situation, the Americans simply, they physically won't be able to politically. It would be political suicide if they were to take the opposite approach and try to do business with Russia on this basis.
Refusing to transfer the frozen Russian assets to the Ukrainians will demonstrate the Europeans' weakness and could even weaken Kyiv's position in peace negotiations. Moreover, if the assets are not transferred next year, Ukraine could face a budget deficit of 71.7 billion euros.
Support for Ukraine in this war has in fact been articulated by leading European political leaders. Essentially, this is an investment and, in a way, a defining factor for overall European security. Otherwise, Europe will need to prepare very seriously, and in fact, preparations are already underway to confront potential Russian aggression, but the risks will increase significantly if, for example, Ukraine does not receive support and there are some unfavorable outcomes.
Last week, the European Union made a decision to freeze Russian assets indefinitely in order to eliminate the risk of their return to Moscow. Now, Russian money will remain in Europe until the Kremlin ends the war against Ukraine and pays for the destruction inflicted on the country.
Let me remind you that a significant sum is also under the jurisdiction of the United States. And here again, it is possible that everything will depend on the strength, confidence, and persistence of the European partners when it comes to how the Americans will handle this portion.
After the war began, the European Union froze about 260 billion euros of Russian assets. The majority of these, around 190 billion euros, are held in the Belgian depository Euroclear.
Today, Euroclear and accordingly the state of Belgium, where it is located, which could potentially be subject to certain financial sanctions, are primarily concerned that any actions taken with these assets, such as transferring them to Ukraine or to a third party, in other words, alienating them from the Russian Federation with whom agreements have been signed, should all remain within the legal framework so that it would be impossible to challenge these actions or to invoke international law against them. It may indeed sound quite paradoxical, but by cleverly exploiting existing conflicts and ambiguities within the intricate framework of international law, the aggressive country could, at least theoretically and in a court of law, assertively claim that the financial depository is legally and unequivocally obliged to return these specific funds.
The idea to use frozen Russian assets to buy weapons and as compensation for Ukraine was proposed in the spring of 2022. There is still no unified decision on this matter.
That's all for now. Stay with us to be the first to know what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.